Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. You saw the thumbnail, you saw the title, and you decided to click on this video. And honestly, I don't blame you. I mean, let's be honest. Black Panther is an incredible character with tons of wealth, power, and influence. Oh, and by the way, I say power with a lowercase p. Since in the Marvel universe, he's really not all that special, and honestly, can you blame him? I mean, the dude has Panther powers. He's not exactly gonna be the strongest in his verse, but you know where he would absolutely shine? The My Hero universe. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do with Izuku in our brand new timeline. This time, Deku's gonna be the son of possibly the greatest combination of heroes I could think of, Mirko and T'Chaka. Or for those of you who don't know, Black Panther's dad, you know, that's kind of his name, T'Chaka. Anyways, question is, how will Izuku handle the responsibility of being the king of Wakanda? And other question is, what hero ranking will Izuku have when it's all said and done? Well, stick around to the end of the video to find out, but with all that being said, leave a like on the video and enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So this specific what if story, we're actually not going to be starting off in the perspective of a young Izuku. Rather, we're actually going to start everything off the day that Izuku's parents meet. In this specific timeline, T'Challa is actually going to be the father of Izuku, and Mirko is going to be his mother. Now, the reason for that is that if Inko and T'Challa were the parents of Izuku, he would practically be quirkless until one day he might get the powers of the Black Panther. And or I could have also just gone with Izuku getting some sort of Panther quirk from his father Hiashi, but I thought that this would probably be a much cooler approach and something that I don't usually do when it comes to taking other characters in the universe and making them part of the story that I usually tell. So this time around, I figured using Mirko's bunny quirk to give that to Izuku and have him inherit a quirk of some sort on top of the powers of the Black Panther, that would have just made for a really cool character. Plus, imagine Izuku with Mirko's personality and the Black Panther suit. I feel like that would be just such a cool combination, and I just fell in love with the idea the second that I came up with it. I did have some help from Shoto Aizawa. Some of you guys might know him. He made a couple of what ifs back in the day, and they're honestly incredible. But yeah, like I said, Izuku's gonna be the son of T'Challa and Mirko, and this is gonna be having some pretty big implications. But you guys might be wondering, how in the world is T'Challa's Deku's dad? Well, let me explain. The way that this is all going to be working is because in the original story, T'Challa had the powers of the Black Panther before he actually became king. We're going to be using that same thing in a little bit of story bending for my own personal sake and to make things easier on me, and say that he went to Japan to be a hero. He rose through the ranks, became a very powerful hero, much like Mirko, or like across like maybe like the 6th ranked hero, and at this time she was like the 7th ranked hero or something like that, which essentially ended up having them both meet together, and one thing would lead to another, with Mirko and T'Challa eventually having Izuku, I don't know. Let's give him the last name of not T'Challa, but of Mirko, but we actually don't know who it is, or at least I don't know right now because I haven't looked it up. But yeah, he's gonna be having that last name, and Izuku's actually gonna be raised by his father for the first year that he's a kid, right? Everything's going good. They're both hero parents, and it's all really cool. Nobody's aware of the fact that they're together or like dating or anything like that, but they are. And after a couple of more months, eventually tragedy would strike. T'Challa's father would unfortunately pass away, and because of that, he would actually have to abandon them and return to Wakanda. He would have ended up offering Mirko to go back with him, but we all know how Mirko is. She's absolutely not gonna want to go to Wakanda. She wants to stay, be a hero, beat up more bad guys. Going to Wakanda where she's just gonna have the easy life, that just doesn't work for her. And so they would have a pretty sad goodbye, with Mirko having a huge smile on her face and saying that she might tell the kid about who his dad is someday. And you know, T'Challa would just laugh before then leaving and saying that if she ever needs anything, to call him. And so, for the next following years, Izuku would practically be raised by his mother Mirko, which would lead to Izuku having a lot more of a Mirko personality, a lot more confidence, and a huge lust for battle. Something our beloved Izuku has absolutely no idea about. But yeah, that's pretty much how life would go for Izuku, and this means that he doesn't actually end up meeting Bakugo during his early years because of the fact that I'm pretty sure Mirko's not going to be middle class level. She's going to be up there when it comes to like her money. So Izuku's probably going to go to one of the like stuck up schools that Ida and Momo went to, the rich kid schools, and Izuku being there, oh, he would be so much different than the other kids. He would be the Bakugo of the school without the bullying. just being the cool guy that always, you know, does things so cool. And it's like, at the beginning, people would be like, what, you got a rabbit quirk? Like, that's lame. But anytime that anybody would say something to Deku that would remotely make him angry or seem like they're making fun of him, Deku would just straight up beat them up badly. And it's like, dude, he has some very, very powerful quirks. I mean, not quirks, but very powerful legs, because of the fact that, you know, his quirk is a rabbit-based quirk, right? But it's an evolved version of his mother's due to the quirk singularity theory, as quirks get stronger the more that they're passed on. So Izuku has an even more powerful version of Mirko's quirk, and Izuku not only just does have the quirk, but he's actually been trained with her fighting style since he could even remember. Since the dude could stand, she was practically teaching him how to fight. And even though he knows how to fight with his legs, something that she would have taught him that's sort of interesting is how to fight with his hands, actually putting him in certain classes to actually learn how to use his fists a lot better, and teaching him his father's fighting style when it comes to like using scratches and stuff like that, and like punches and stuff. So Izuku is sort of a hybrid of, you know, his mother and his father, but much more his mother, obviously. Eventually, this would end up leading Izuku down a path of him deciding to become a hero, and eventually, after all would be said and done and a bunch of years would pass, Izuku would finally find himself at the UA entrance exam, where Izuku would show up, get great scores on the test, and eventually show off his goods during the robots section of the test. Izuku starts everything off by immediately blitzing in at a robot using his legs and just kicking the head straight off, followed by spinning mid-air, grabbing the head and tossing it at another robot, which causes it to turn towards Izuku as the dude literally rushes towards it, kicking it in the chest, sending it flying into a building, as Deku would just run around the battlefield as fast as he possibly can and just start kicking robot after robot after robot, destroying as much as he could possibly do, until eventually we would hear rumbling in the distance, followed by a bunch of people beginning to run away from the 0-pointer. And it would be in this moment that Izuku would know that it's his time to shine. Looking up at the 0-pointer, he would think to himself that he has to fight that thing. There's no way his mom's gonna be proud of him if he doesn't take that thing down. And so Izuku would begin rushing at it, wanting to actually fight this thing, not knowing if he could, but taking the chance. As he would then stride, Izuku would actually hear the voice of a girl nearby screaming for help. So Izuku immediately turns and rushes straight towards her, thinking to himself, what? I'm supposed to fight this thing, but its body, it just moves. And Izuku grabs onto Uraraka as he saves her from the robot. And immediately after this, the test would be over, as Izuku would go on to yell some dumb stuff out into the open, and eventually after this, Izuku would make his way home, as he would arrive and see a letter on the fridge that says, left you some food in the microwave, and so he would go over there to check, being like, there's no way she cooked for me, before then seeing another letter that says, come on kid, you really think I cooked? Just order something, as Izuku would let out a laugh and then begin to order himself something off of Uber Eats, going on to order, what should my boy order? Something good. Let's do Payway. I don't know if you guys have ever had that, but it's like Panda Express, but better, because the chicken's actually, you know, chicken, and the sauce, oof, let me tell you guys, it is good. So if you guys have one of those in your area, go check it out. Get the orange chicken plate. Trust me, you will love it. And if you don't, then there's something wrong with your taste buds. But moving on, Izuku eventually after this would have to wait for approximately about 1 week before the school would even tell him anything about what happened. And during that week, let's just say that it would be very, very, very eventful, because during this week, eventually one day his mother would end up coming home a lot sooner than he had actually expected her, as she would then just sit down, look at him, and say that she has some news to lay down on him, throwing her leg on top of the other as she would grab a drink and just begin to drink up, you know what I mean? As she would look at him and say, look kid, I'm not gonna sit here and sugarcoat things. Your father's dead. And from here, Deku would say, my dad? What about it? Why should I care? And she would go on to say, well, you should care because unfortunately for you, you're gonna have to go visit Wakanda. And I'm gonna have to go with you, taking a break for a couple of days. As Izuku looking at his mother would be like, are you kidding me? Like, we're going to some, what even is that? And he would look it up before then finding out that that place is just some poor nation. Izuku would begin getting angry as eventually, the people from Wakanda would arrive at Izuku's door and take him there, as Izuku would go on to discover that Wakanda is not all that it looks to be, ending up arriving on the throne room as everybody would have a conversation and Izuku would just look around at all of them being like, I don't belong here. I don't even look like you guys. I'm Blasian. And then he would realize, oh. As from here, Izuku goes on to question who his dad even was, with him looking at his mom and his mom saying, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you, your dad was Black Panther, or, his real name, T'Challa. And Izuku would be like, what? You mean to tell me my dad was that cool hero? And she would say, yeah, he was a cool hero. Not as cool as me, though. As from here, Izuku and her go on to have a laugh, and everybody watching them would just be like, can you guys be serious for one moment? Before Izuku would just walk in front of all of them and go, nah, not my style. Look, if you guys want me to be king because my dad died, I don't really feel like doing it, unless there's something that comes with being the king. As suddenly, his aunt would go on to say that she loves this kid. As from here, his grandmother would actually go over towards Izuku before hugging him and saying that they need a king and he's the only one able to do this, saying that she knows it's hard but he has to do it. Wakanda needs a leader. Izuku says, I don't want to become a leader. What does that entail? Do I just have to sit here and give up my dreams of becoming a hero? I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna sit here on some throne room. Give me something. Tell me why I should become king. Before then, his aunt would go on to say that he could have the powers of the Black Panther. And Izuku's ears immediately perk up as he would look towards her and be like, wait, are you serious? And she just goes on to say, yeah, let me show you. Before then going on to pretty much just abandon the whole place, with all the elders looking at him being like, this kid cannot be the leader. As from here, Izuku just points his hand up and is all like, yeah, you're right, I can't be one. One of you guys should take the spot and I'll take those powers. How's that sound? As from here, Izuku would then just go on to go to the room and be absolutely flabbergasted by all the technology that he would see, but the coolest thing would be the necklace that Izuku would be given of the Panther's actual suit. Izuku would put it on and immediately feel like he just looks so cool. She would show him all the tech upgrades, the claws and things of that nature, and Izuku would say that he needs this now, saying that he'll become king for this thing. As from here, she would go on to explain that that's not it. He's even going to be given powers, the powers of the Black Panther. As from here, Izuku would become king and would go on to receive the powers of the Black Panther. As once this would be done, Izuku would then go on to say that yeah, he's leaving now. As everybody would look at him and say that he can't just leave, he's the king. And he would say, listen to me, I'm the king. You're going to do what I say. And what I say is that I'm going to go off, play hero, and somebody's going to warm up my seat while I come back. I'm not going to sit here in some throne room being bored every day, but if you need me, call me and I'll come. But if not, leave me alone, and my auntie here can actually take care of the Wakandan duties. As from here, he would go on to say to give her the powers of the Black Panther, and she would become the Black Panther, with him basically saying that there can be two now. As he would go on to explain that he's not going to be here, she can take his place, and he's going to go off and become a hero. He doesn't care about being a prince or a king, he just wants to fight bad guys. And so, he would straight up just leave, with his mother having a huge smile on her face, as they would end up returning back to Japan, as Izuku would basically barely arrive right on time. That same morning, Izuku would actually have classes, and so he would arrive a couple of hours late, meaning Izuku would have completely missed the quirk apprehension test. And so Aizawa would actually be considering expelling Izuku for not even showing up on the first day. But luckily for him, his mother is pro hero Mirko, and she was absolutely not letting that happen. And so Izuku would actually go and actually take the quirk apprehension test all by himself, with Aizawa watching him and trying to look cool, like trying to intimidate him, telling him that he better be on time. As Izuku would say, careful, you don't want to talk to a prince like that. As from here, he would then go on to do every single one of the tests, blowing them out of the water with his newfound Black Panther enhanced rabbit quirk. Now Izuku's a panther rabbit, as weird as that sounds. But Izuku would blow every single test out of the water, and I'm not even going to tell you guys what he gets, because I'm going to save that for later. But But just know, Izuku definitely doesn't get expelled. And so, 2 days would pass of school, as eventually one day after all their classes would be done, they would be sitting in the room when suddenly, All Might would come busting through the door going, "I am here, coming in like a normal person," going on to explain his role in the school and basically telling everybody that he's going to be their pro hero course instructor. And so everybody would begin to be terrified, being like, "Are you going to expel us too?" And he's all like, "Oh no, that's Aizawa's thing. I'm here to mold you into the perfect heroes. But before that, you gotta look like pros." As he would click a button revealing everyone's costumes, and we would eventually get the "My Hero" song in the background as everybody would come out looking really cool. But the person that would look the coolest would be Izuku, coming out with this awesome like just necklace and like just his normal clothes underneath. But in an instant, Izuku, looking towards everybody who would begin asking him where his costume is, would say it's right here, as his costume would immediately just appear on his body, and Izuku would go on to show everybody just how cool his costume looks, with everybody being like, "Dude, there is no way, that is so cool." Kirishima would be like, "Dude, that's manly." And eventually we would get the section where everybody has to choose who exactly they're going to be going up against. And unfortunately for Bakugo, he's going to be being faced up against Izuku, somebody who's not going to sit there and just take Bakugo's trash talk, take his attitude, or any of those things. And as you could imagine, Bakugo's going to have an attitude. He's going to stare Deku down in a mean way, being bratty, just thinking that he's the best of everything and wanting to crush him, telling him that he has no prayer in the world to save him from him, and just things along that nature, just the things that you would expect Bakugo to say. This would light a fire within Izuku, and he would stay quiet until he finally got the moment to lay his hands on Bakugo, as eventually Izuku and Uraraka would make their way towards the building. As what would pretty much end up going down is Izuku would tell Uraraka to stay behind on the first floor and he'll handle this. That blonde Pomeranian is gonna need to be taught a lesson, as eventually you could just hear Bakugo shooting through the building going, "Where are you, you damn nerd?" As Izuku, finally hearing this, his senses would snap, and in an instant, as Bakugo comes in to throw a right punch at Izuku, Deku would grab it before slamming him on the ground and actually proceeding to smash apart that gauntlet that he has on his arm. And so Bakugo would get up slowly with an angry expression, going on to say that Izuku was gonna pay for that, as Deku would just hold his hand out and do the "come here" motion. Bakugo would rush back in, but Deku would dodge every single one of his blows, until eventually one of Bakugo's explosions would actually end up hitting Deku in the face and would actually cause his suit to turn purple. Eventually he would throw another one, causing more of it to turn purple, and Izuku would just be smirking underneath the mask, going that this is gonna be fun. As from here, Bakugo would land attack after attack after attack, and Izuku would just have a huge grin on his face, until eventually he would form the Wakandan like pose thing, and then he would release it, as Bakugo would be sent flying through the room. But unluckily for Izuku, this meant that Bakugo had finally charged up his gauntlet, and so he would go on to pull the pin towards Izuku, as a huge explosion would go off through the room, but Deku did not care. He straight up lunged into the explosion, not caring about anything. And as he did that, his entire suit became purple, but he would reach back his arm and go on to scratch Bakugo square in the face, leaving a scar, as instantly he would form the pose of the Wakandans, release it point blank in Bakugo's face, and this would send him flying out of the building as he would crash onto the ground and he would be knocked completely unconscious. Following this, he goes on to use his headpiece, going on to try to call Uraraka, but it would be broken due to the explosion. And so he would make his way back down, as Uraraka would be worried about him, asking what happened, and Izuku says that he took out the trash. As from here, they would make their way towards Ida's room, with Uraraka serving as a distraction, and Izuku using his Black Panther suit to actually turn invisible, because yup, I'm gonna be giving him that ability, because come on now, their little like spaceships are able to turn invisible, why can't he do that? So his suit turns him invisible, and he would touch onto the bomb, as he would finally reveal that he was there the whole time, and Ida would be like, "How did you get there, you hero?" You know, acting like a villain still, before All Might would just go, "Hero team wins!" Before then going on to check up on Bakugo immediately and asking Deku if he's okay after that explosion, going on to actually scold Bakugo, because he's the one who took it too far, not Izuku. He started it, so even though he would have a couple choice words for Deku, Deku, he wouldn't have almost anything in comparison to what he would go on to say to Bakugo, saying that if that had been any other student, that could have killed them. And Bakugo would just be angry, looking at Deku, being like, how dare you, beat me like that, with like going home just angrily, deciding that he's gonna make sure to crush that kid someday. And so class would continue as everybody would go on to take their own hero versus villains test, and after all would be said and done, the students would finally find themselves in class the next day, as they would be handed out permission slips by All Might, who tells them to sign these from their parents or their guardians and to return, as they're going to be going to the USJ, with everybody being extremely excited, being like, what, the USJ, are you serious? And even Izuku would be a little happy about this, knowing what this actually is, not Universal Japan Studios, but the something unforeseen simulation training joint, USJ, unforeseen joint, or I don't know, but whatever. The point is, Izuku knows what's going to happen because his mother Mirko would have definitely told him. And so what we would actually get is a little bit of a cool scene in which Deku finally comes home and Mirko would say, hey kid, you finally here? With Izuku saying, yeah ma. As from here she would go on to say, are you finally going to go to the USJ? With Deku going on to show her the permission slip and her telling him to make sure to crush every other kid in these tests. As from here, Deku would smirk and Mirko would look at her kid before then saying, all right then, go get some sleep, you're gonna need it. And so Deku would get some sleep before then returning the next day, having a normal day of class, followed by 2 more, I want to say, because teachers usually give us like 2 to 3 days to turn in permission slips, usually actually like a week, but here I'm gonna say 2 to 3 days. And so eventually we would find ourselves with Izuku and everybody else on the USJ bus. Finally, they would end up unloading everything, and eventually they would find themselves in front of the Hero 13. She would then go on to explain how the USJ works, going on to explain how quirks are super dangerous and things along those notions, until eventually we would finally get something cool happen. A purple mist would appear in the center of everything, and Izuku's senses were telling him to attack, and so before Kurogiri could even get a word out, Deku would lunge at it saying, "Get lost!" Deku would rush straight towards the direction of Kurogiri, as Kurogiri's body would phase right through Deku, and Deku would go flying right through it, noticing one thing. There was something inside of there. And so Deku would look right back up towards the direction of Kurogiri, thinking of what he can do, and he would lunge right back up towards his direction, thinking, well, if I can't get him the first time, I'll get him the second. But as he would be doing this, a purple portal would actually appear right before him, as he would jump straight through it, and he would notice that a lot of his classmates actually would begin getting pulled through portals themselves. Deku, seeing all this going down, would start to grit his teeth, as he would immediately fall into a vat of water, as the first thing Deku would notice would be a bunch of villains. And what would happen to Deku would be kind of funny. A gigantic smirk would go across his face, as he would say, finally, I get to fight against some freaking villains. He would rush in towards their direction as he would start punching and kicking underwater. And mind you, there are like 50% power just due to the fact that he is, well, in water. But as this would be happening, he would feel a tongue wrap around his body as it would drag him away. But for some reason, his instincts didn't register it as an attack, more of as an ally. So Deku let it happen. And because of this, Tsuyu was actually able to rescue both Deku and Mineta, just like she does in the original. From here, they would both be on top of the boat as they would begin to question what in the world they should do with these villains. They won't exactly be able to just lunge across to the other side. And Deku would say, they could do that, or they could help him take them out. As Tsuyu and Mineta would look at him, and Mineta specifically would be like, what do you mean take them out? How are we supposed to stand up to a bunch of villains, Midoriya? As Deku would look towards the direction of Mineta and say, punch me. And so Mineta would do so, and he would turn towards Tsuyu and say, just start hitting me, trust me, I can handle it. As, both of them would start doing so, and Deku would get a huge grin on his face as the mask would start to sort of like appear on Deku's head, and Deku would just say, now just watch this, as he would jump up into the air and his suit would be covered in purple, as Deku in this moment would just cross his arms in the Wakandan symbol and let it go, causing a gigantic wave of water to explode, destroying all of the villains that were there. And then Deku would just start swimming towards the direction of the shore, noticing that Aizawa actually had his hands full with a bunch of these villains. So Deku would do a cartwheel into a somersault, backflipping all the way towards the direction of Aizawa, as he would would finally come in and kick one of these villains that was about to attack him right in the head, sending it flying into the wall, as the rest of the villains would look at him and be like, "What? He's fighting like a villain." And Deku would say, "I'm a hero, but I do fight like a villain," as he would rush in and start clawing at some, straight up leaving visible scars on their bodies, with Aizawa saying to chill out, that they don't fight that way. And Deku would say, "You don't, but I do," as he would rush back in, landing blow after blow after blow on these villains. And eventually a couple of, hits would have actually ended up accumulating on Deku, as suddenly, the moment that Deku would look up, he would see a fist come flying right at his face, which he would narrowly dodge and jump right out of the way, being like, "Huh, that's crazy, you actually almost got me, big guy." And it'd be in that moment that Shigaraki would say, "Come on, Nomu, I told you to kill the brat," as instantly the Nomu would rush back in towards the direction of Deku, and Deku's just not having it. He would start moving around as fast as he possibly can, kicking it into overdrive, using his mother's ability as well as the powers granted to him by the Wakandian herb, as he would begin lunging from side to side, dodging the Nomu's blows, eventually grabbing onto one of his arms and extending his claws as he would try to straight up rip the arm off. But one thing he would notice is that he only got halfway there before the Nomu would have actually punched him off of himself, and Deku would go flying onto the floor, rolling around in the dirt, with Aizawa looking at the Nomu turning its quirk off, as he would stare at the direction of Shigaraki and ask what the heck this thing is. But Deku, getting up quickly, would say that that's not the end of this, rushing back in, closing his arms in the iconic Wakandan pose as he would let it fly, and the energy charged up would actually send the Nomu flying back just a couple feet, as the Nomu would end up grabbing, like getting a hold of himself, as Deku would say, "So, it looks like you're not as weak as I thought. Better hope you can withstand this," as he rushes in as fast as he possibly can and lunges at the Nomu, grabbing the Nomu's head with his legs as he straight up rips the head of the Nomu clean off, and would just stare at the direction of Shigaraki, with the Nomu's body hitting the ground with a loud thud, and Shigaraki just watching this in utter terror. Deku instantly would lunge towards the direction of Shigaraki, wondering if he can regenerate too, as he would go in to land like a deadly blow, but before it could actually connect, a scarf would actually lunge and grab at Deku, grabbing him before the blow could actually connect, and this would give Kurogiri just enough time to teleport Shigaraki out of there, to which Deku would turn to Aizawa and be like, "What are you doing? I almost had him. You let them get away." And Aizawa would turn to him and say that that's not how heroes do this. Jeez, did he have to be as much as his mom as he is? And Deku would say that he's his own person. His mom just so happened to teach him how to fight like a real hero. Unlike you, she gets the job done. And Aizawa would look at Deku with his, quirk thingy, charged up, with him saying that he doesn't want to have to discipline him. And Deku would say, "You could try it, but it won't work." Just like standing head to head against Aizawa, as Aizawa would just be like, "I'm gonna expel you the next time you do that." And Deku would look at him and say, "You can try it, but this school needs me, not the other way around." As he would just walk off in a huff, and finally All Might would end up arriving there, as he would realize that the entire situation was basically neutralized. Suddenly, we would just cut to Deku walking out of the USJ, as he would shoot a text to his mom saying that these heroes weren't willing to do whatever it takes to win, but he was. And Mirko would be like, "Yeah, sometimes it's like that, but you gotta deal with it. Don't go mouthing off to Aizawa." But Deku would kind of go red in the face, being like just texting back, ... And she would be like, "You did it," as he'd be like, "Yeah." From here, she would text back a bunch of laughing emojis saying that he's in for it, and that if he gets expelled, she's not putting him into another school. He's gonna have to earn it. As Deku would say, "Come on." And so Aizawa would come out, as Deku would just look at him and just look down, with Aizawa kind of understanding that Deku finally realized he messed up. So Aizawa just looks at him and says, "It's fine, kid. Next time don't go so overboard. And don't try to step it to a teacher. Remember, I'm still in charge." Deku from here would just grit his teeth, as he'd be like, "Sure thing, Aizawa." And then right after this, we would get a 1 week break just because of the, all the events that just transpired because of the USJ and stuff like that. So Deku would basically use this entire time to just train by himself, try to get himself stronger, develop new techniques, brand new Black Panther attack patterns. And eventually he would get a text from his auntie basically saying that his suit's going to be getting a bit of an upgrade. as Deku would like feel this like weird, like not feel something, but he would look at his necklace that he's always wearing, and he would see it start glowing for a second, as he would ask what exactly those updates are, and she would say that he could find out later. As from here, Deku would just kind of start smiling as he would start bench pressing all the weight that he was already doing. Mind you, this dude's sitting there casually bench pressing like 3,000 pounds. Like, the dude is sitting there, and those are custom plates, by the way. Like, that's the only reason that he's able to use it on a bench press, right? And he's using like a custom bar that won't break or bend, made out of straight up vibranium. So Deku's over there just working out, pumping iron, as eventually Miracle would finally come home after defeating a bunch of villains, and she would go on to ask Izuku how he's doing, with him, you know, showing off that he's actually getting a much more defined upper body, and now his upper body starting to match his lower body, because Deku's always had these like super buff, like thick calves with like these nicely defined quads. Like, this dude is ripped from his legs, safe to say. And he also has like this 8-pack, so it's just kind of crazy. But Deku's still gonna be like sort of as short as he is in the original. Maybe I'll generous and give him like 2 inches on his height. But other than that, yeah, Deku's like pretty much the same. So Mirko would just begin to ask how his first week was, and he would say, oh, you know, eventful. As from here, you know, they have a little bit of a conversation, and finally we can now jump cut straight to the day where the sports festival would be taking place, just because I don't really feel like covering, you know, the Shinso situation that happens beforehand or anything like that. So let's just get straight into the sports festival. Let's not beat around the bush. The first event, obviously we all know it to be the race section, and Deku having a rabbit quirk, a quirk that basically enhances his speed, his senses, his reflexes. Yeah, Deku is going to be up there when it comes to his placement in the race, because obviously in the original Deku ended up winning, but that was only due to the fact that he used an explosion. This time Deku's actually going to be coming in first place because of the fact that he's straight up just that fast. Deku's faster than Ida, and Ida would be stunned like, yo, like I straight up have a speed quirk and this dude is over here outrunning me? Like, Ida even used Recipro Burst trying to keep up, you know, but it just didn't work. Deku was just too fast. And so what would pretty much end up taking place is that Deku gets the 1 million point headband. And following this, he would end up teaming up with Uraraka, Tokiyami, and Mei Hatsume, just like in the original. Following this, Deku would not do the, you know, play it safe approach, but instead he would lunge towards other teams trying to get their headbands. And Deku wasn't going for the weak prey. He was going for the ones that are the strongest, Bakugo and Todoroki's teams, and he instantly told his team that they're rushing in towards them. So it would be kind of an awkward situation, because in the midst of Deku actually facing off against Bakugo and Todoroki, their headband would actually end up getting stolen, and Deku would turn towards the direction of the person who did it, as his team, Bakugo's team and Todoroki's team would rush in trying to take the headband. But Deku, realizing that the timer was counting down, would lunge towards the direction of Todoroki, grabbing onto a headband that would barely ensure that they pass on to the next section. And Deku would wipe the sweat off of his brow, thinking to himself that that was way closer than he would have liked, saying that he works better alone. As from here, we would finally get a section for him to prove just how well he works alone, the 1v1 battles. And the first thing that would take place is that Deku would face off against Shinso. And this battle is actually going to be a bit of an interesting one, because as much as we know that Deku's very powerful in this timeline, Deku doesn't just let people trash talk him and not say something back. It's just not in his nature this time around. So when Shinso would go on to say that he's so blessed to have such an awesome quirk and just start saying like, it must be nice to have all these cool abilities, you know, Deku would instantly fall for it, saying something to Shinso as, you know, Deku would just be standing there, like just looking at the direction of Shinso, as he would just go completely paralyzed. As Shinso would go on a grin and just tell Deku, walk off the stage. From here, Deku would start inching closer and closer to walking off the edge, when suddenly, inside of Deku's mindscape, he could actually see his father, meeting him for the second time in his life under sort of strange circumstances, as his dad would tell him to snap out of it, that he's under mind control, and he has to go back out there and win, or else he's gonna disappoint him, his mother, and most importantly, himself. And Deku would look at his dad, say, yeah, whatever, old man, I'll make sure I win this, for you. As T'Challa would have a huge smile on his face, and Deku would just walk away being like, psych, as from here he would snap out of it right before he would actually jump off and lunge right back towards the direction of Shinso, as he would go on to put the hands on this man, punching him in the nose, causing Shinso to start bleeding as he lunges, begins to fall. But Deku grabs him by the shirt and shoves his knee into his stomach, as after this Deku would flip Shinso over his back and then kick him straight off of the arena, as Shinso goes flying into the wall and would just sit there in a crater right there. Why did I say it like that? And Shinso would just create a crater in the wall, just straight up sitting there unconscious, bleeding from his nose, and just not having a good day. But Deku would walk off the stage, as some people would be like, yo, that was a bit brutal, don't you think? We wanted action, but that's kind of crazy. And Deku would look up as he starts waving his hands kind of show baiting, you know what I mean? As everybody, some people start cheering and some people are like, yeah, they're kind of half cheering, you get what I'm saying? But right after this, we would end up getting Deku just getting assigned his next battle against Todoroki. And this time, because Deku doesn't have powers that are similar to All Might's, he's not going to be getting asked are you the secret love child of All Might? Because obviously his mother's Inko. And so, the announcer Mike would be like, and it's the number something hero son, Izuku, we don't know her last name, so Izuku Midoriya, let's just say that Izuku T'Challa, right? Or, I don't know. But basically, he just gets called, and everybody's like, wow, that's who he is? He's the son of Mirko? People start kind of going crazy, and then you just see Mirko, who's we just panned to Mirko, who's at home, who wasn't bothered to actually travel here to watch this, knowing that her son was going to win, or at least hoping he will. As, she smiles, and she's like, yeah, that's my son, but he's going to be an even better hero than I ever was. As from here, Deku would just be standing in the front, on the stadium, as Todoroki would come in, and they would say, versus the number 2 hero, Todoroki's son, or Endeavor's son, and it's everybody's like, yo, these two are sons of pro heroes, this is so crazy. Everybody just starts getting so excited, because it's dude, when you really start to think about it, it is actually kind of an impressive thing that they have 2 of the kids, and both of them are top 10 heroes. So Deku and Todoroki are both getting hyped up, and everybody would be like, this might as well be the final match. This is going to be incredible. And the second that happens, we would have Midnight being like, Hajime, as she would just say start. And right after that would happen, Deku would instantly feel that Todoroki was going to launch something. So Deku would be shot at with this massive amount of ice, which would go on to completely encapsulate him inside of it. And Deku would just be standing there frozen in the ice, as Todoroki would smirk and say that there's no way they really compared him to himself. As Todoroki would begin to walk away, and Midnight would be like, looks like this was a quick battle, as everybody would be counting Deku out, but Deku inside of the ice would start to slowly crack it, as suddenly everybody would look towards the fighting arena, and right before Shoto was actually about to get off, he actually noticed that the ice was starting to shatter, so he turned back around, and in that moment, the ice just started breaking, as Deku lunged right out of there, and turning towards Shigaraki, he would just stare at him with this look of I am going to obliterate you. And Todoroki would put up an ice wall before Deku could do anything, but Deku's leg would shatter straight through that, as he would kick Todoroki in the stomach, sending him flying off of the arena, or so he would think, but Todoroki would use ice to keep himself off from touching the ground. In this moment, Deku looking towards Todoroki would just be like, I'm not gonna lose to some weak ice quirk, as he would lunge back in for more and more and more, and just not let up. And Todoroki just keeps trying to freeze Deku, but Deku's seen that trick before, dodging out of the way, as he would use his legs to shatter the ice. Not having access to his Black Panther suit, he would rely more on his mother's training, and also, all the extra exercise that he's been doing, as eventually he would close the distance between himself and Todoroki. And as everything gets closer and closer, President Mike would start going crazy on the announcements, as Deku would be like, night night, icy hot, going in to throw a kick towards the direction of Todoroki, but before it could land, Todoroki would go and burst in flames, causing Deku normally to, to back off. But Deku doubled down and proceeded to kick Todoroki so hard in the head, he gave him a concussion and knocked him straight out, sending him to like bite the dust, literally, as his face would would smash into the grass, and he would just start like sliding down it with his his little sports festival outfit getting covered in green like grass stains, and his face even being stained with some of the grass, with his like dirt literally being in his mouth. From here, Deku would go on a smile as he would hold both hands up, saying that he wasn't going to lose to that, and Endeavor would just be there in the background being like, Shoto! Super mad at the fact that his son lost, with Mirko smirking, saying, I knew that kid wasn't going to lose. As from here, Deku would walk off, with everybody being so shocked at how events actually ended up playing out, as Deku from here would go over to the waiting area, and instantly Uraraka would just start praising Deku and telling him just how cool he was out there, with Deku smiling and thanking her for all that. As from here, he would just wait for his next match, but Bakugo comes walking in the room, saying not to hold anything back in this next battle, because he wants to make sure that his defeat is 100% undeniable. And Deku's just like, oh yeah, sure, I'll make sure that your defeat is 100% undeniable. As Bakugo just looks at him and just doesn't say anything. Bakugo's demeanor would be so cold and different, as he had been training his butt off, making sure that he developed a move that would destroy Deku. And without that little hero costume of his, there's no way he's going to be able to counter it. And so, the battle would begin. Deku versus Bakugo. They would find themselves standing in the arena, as, obviously we would hear the starting pistol go off, as Bakugo instantly lunges at the direction of Deku, but before they actually can get close enough to create contact, Bakugo would cross his arms just like Deku did, and blast an explosion at his direction, square in his face, causing a bunch of debris dust to go on his face, and Bakugo would have sent himself flying back as well, spinning in the air and shooting explosions up into the air, as AP shots would start shooting from every direction, way sooner than in the original. But Deku just dodges out of the way, and eventually Bakugo starts shooting a bunch of explosions Vegeta style, as eventually a bunch of smoke would rise up into the air, and Deku, using his senses, would start to kind of figure out where Bakugo is. But Bakugo just wouldn't let up, and eventually Bakugo would just be like, whatever, throwing one final explosion that would clear everything up, but Deku, leaping up into the air, would charge his arm backwards as he would try to throw a punch at Bakugo's face, but Bakugo would dodge it, grabbing onto Deku's shirt and throwing him as high as he can, as Deku would go up into the sky, crossing his arms, trying to block whatever attack Bakugo's about to use, as Bakugo would say, Howitzer, impact! The blast would hit Deku straight on, as he would have most of his outfit destroyed from the explosion, and he would smirk, holding onto Bakugo's arm, which would be in, arm's reach from him, as he would grab Bakugo, placing him in a sort of armbar mid-air, as he would punch Bakugo in the face, and Bakugo would try to return an explosion to, pay him back for that. But Deku just wasn't having it. He would grab onto Bakugo's arm, the other one, right? And now both of them are grabbed up, putting them both in an arm bar, as he would proceed to then spin in the air and pile drive this man straight into the arena. I mean, Bakugo genuinely would be knocked out, getting a straight up concussion, as Bakugo's head would leave a crater in the stage, and Deku would just walk off as he would spit some blood on the floor, saying, congratulations on second place. As from here, we would end up pretty much just getting the medal stuff happening, where Deku would be crowned as first, Bakugo would be crowned as second, being very angry at Deku, so he had to be put on restraints, and everybody would just be watching, cheering the name of Izuku, as this dude just seems like an awesome person, he's gonna be a great hero. And Mirko would just be grinning, watching from her, her TV, as from here, she would basically say that it's about time she goes out to beat up some people okay, I clearly messed it up. Mirko would, okay, picture it like this. Mirko's at her house, she just watched Deku, obviously go crazy in the sports festival, and she would just click the remote, turning the TV off, and she would have a huge grin on her face and just be like, I'm itching to kick some butt, as she would go out for some hero patrol, and she would do just that. So from here, we kind of go into Deku's point of view as we would flash forward to the hero internship periods, which obviously all begins with the hero name and stuff like that. And you obviously can't go wrong with the name Black Panther. I mean, seriously, that is such a cool name. It differentiates him from his mother, and it kind of like adds to that, like, you know, Wakandan legacy. Plus Deku, once he heard the name that his father had, he just had to take that thing. Like, it was awesome. You know, some people in the classroom would be like, whoa, like that name, it's awesome. And Aizawa, you know, hearing this would be like, it sure is. You know, there used to be a hero called the Black Panther a while ago. You guys probably haven't heard of him because a lot of his activities were in the nighttime, so he's much like me. And then they would all be like, really? There used to be a hero just like that? With Aizawa saying, yeah, the two are probably related in some sort of way, shape, or form. As the class would just look at him and be like, are you kidding me? Your parents are both pro heroes? As Deku would say, well, my dad was a pro hero. That was before he died. As they would all kind of like be quiet, and Deku would say, nah, I don't care, I never met the guy. You know, just kind of like in his mind thinking, well, I kind of did, because, you know, like he met him in like the afterlife thingy-majigger that the Black Panther universe has as a thing. As from here, Deku would obviously get an internship message from his mother, and it's like, dude, he's absolutely not gonna pass up the chance to go out and like do what he's been wanting to do since he was a kid. Like, Mirko has been training him all his life, but she's never taken him out on a hero patrol. And they've always like done this sort of like 1v1 training where like she would just kick the life out of this kid. That's why he can take so much damage, because she raised him up like she was a man, bro. Like, it's crazy. This man Deku did not need no male role models in his life. He had his mom, and it's just like, dude, it's pretty funny. But yeah, upon their little internship, they would pretty much just go on a bunch of hero patrols, and eventually, after taking out a huge group of like thug villains or whatever whatever you would want to call it, like these dudes were moving weapons and moving like heavy substances and stuff like that, and they just absolutely wrecked them. So what pretty much ends up taking place is that after defeating them, Deku would like punch one in the head and like leave him just there on the ground, as he would turn towards his mom and say that this is getting so boring, saying that these guys are weak. As Mirko would say, yeah, she's been itching for a good fight, which is why they're going to be going to Hosu City. As Deku would smirk, saying, isn't that where the hero killer is? And she would say, sure is, kid. You better make sure you find him first, because if I get my hands on him, you're not getting a single punch in. As from here, you know, the both of them would make their way there on this private jet that would go so fast. And once they would arrive there, it would be like the night before the Nomu incident, meaning that at this point, Shigaraki still was only like 2 hours away from like trying to recruit Stain and stuff like that. But unfortunately for Stain, he would end up being found by the heroes before that could happen. And mind you, this is also before the Nomu. Wait, I already said that. Okay. Yeah. They would spend the entire like time just searching for Stain the second that they touched ground, as Mirko would actually be the one that actually would find Stain first, and she would begin to fight this dude on the spot, kicking Stain into a wall before he even had time to react, as she would catch him off guard, and she would rush back in once more trying to finish the job, thinking this dude's so weak. As suddenly, Stain would actually dodge out of the way right in the nick of time, as he would slash at Mirko's leg, which was fully extended and stuck in the wall, and he would nick her just enough to get one small tiny drop of blood, as he would, you know, have a little smile on his face, and Mirko would say, you kidding me? That's pretty weak, and here you are calling yourself the hero killer. But Stain would just look at her and say, that's exactly what I intend to do. As he would go to lick the blade, and just moments before he could actually do it, Deku, using his invisibility power that he has from his Black Panther suit, obviously, would appear, kicking Stain in the ribs, shattering them. As Stain would go tumbling straight into one of the walls, leaving an imprint on it, with Deku turning towards his mother saying, so, I wouldn't get a shot in, would I? And she would say that was a cheap shot. As from here, Stain would slowly begin to get out of there as the rubble would start hitting the ground, and Mirko and Deku would both be on alert, turning towards the direction of Stain, as he would release all of his bloodlust and murderous intent. But surprisingly enough, this would literally just not affect either of them, since they look at him with their own murderous aura, and you would just see this cool panel of Deku and Mirko Black Panther as they would stare down at Stain and land a dual I was about to say father and son kick, but no, mother and son kick, which would absolutely obliterate Stain. I mean, they would shatter the remainder of his ribs and send him crashing straight into one of the walls. I mean, it's genuinely overkill. So this means that Stain never meets with Shigaraki, he never has the Hosu incident go down, and so this means that we never get the whole interaction between Shigaraki and Deku at the mall, which, if it happened in this timeline, Shigaraki was probably gonna straight up die for trying to tell Deku that he was gonna kill him. Like, bro, Deku would have straight up destroyed this man at the mall. But that aside, even if this wasn't the case, Mirio would have actually been there and been way more than enough to stop him. And the reason that I say Mirio would have been present is due to the fact that he would receive one for all in this timeline. Meaning that even though this entire time I've been hyping up Deku, Mirko, and all of these really cool interactions that I've had, this whole thing is just not him being like the strongest in the verse. He's actually going to be playing second fiddle to Mirio in this timeline, just due to the fact that Deku will not be able to touch him. Mirio's going to be having danger sense, and like, dude, Mirio's just going to be way too busted to even hope to beat by any single character in the My Hero Academia universe. That said though, we now jump into Deku returning to school, as he would be taking part in the hero race rescue to, pretty much save All Might in their training, but obviously he would win, being incredibly fast due to his mother's years of training and the added enhancements that he received from the Black Panther flower that he pretty much digested. This means that he doesn't really create the shoot style, and instead he has sort of a weird hybrid of Mirko and the shoot style and his father's style, so it's just kind of weird and it's not called that at all. But that does mean that Deku's practically ready for anything that this world has to throw at him, which is a really good thing because now Deku actually has to go face to face with All Might alongside Bakugo for the final exam. And the way that I can see this whole thing playing out is just Deku and Bakugo initially kind of like having this thing against each other, as once All Might would arrive and he would hit Bakugo, sending him flying, Deku would rush in towards the direction of All Might, throwing a kick which All Might would block, but it would send him flying back, with All Might looking up, being stunned to see that Deku at this point was practically like actually dealing damage to him, and he didn't expect this to happen. But All Might would be like, "So, you're a lot stronger than I thought, young man." As from here, Deku would say, "You got no idea." But Bakugo out of nowhere would come shooting in with his own explosion, being like, "Howitzer impact!" And Deku would be like, "Come on, Bakugo, get out of my way." And Bakugo just like trying to fight, but he would get absolutely destroyed by All Might. But Deku coming in, not wanting to see this happen, to his teammate, because, right now the circumstances are that they're both teammates. Deku would come in, saving Bakugo and putting him down, as he would say, "Look, clearly you want to help me fight this guy. I'm gonna need you to land your strongest attack once I get him weakened. And the best thing that we can do is this: hand me one of your gauntlets." And Bakugo would do so. As from here, he would just kind of like look at Deku, having this respect for him, because it's like he's not gonna be like, "Shut up, weakling," or "Be quiet, nerd," because like now it's proven that Bakugo's just weaker than him. So Bakugo sort of has to give him his flowers and kind of listen to him, right? And Bakugo didn't hear Deku kind of like hold it over him that he destroyed him in this exam thingamajigger. So Bakugo isn't really like hating Deku in this timeline. And so what would pretty much end up taking place is that they would rush back in towards All Might, and Deku would land a flurry of kicks and slash attacks using his claws, which would actually hurt All Might pretty badly. As from here, Deku using his gauntlet would pull the pin, and it would shoot straight in the face of All Might, with All Might barely having any time to block it with his hand, meaning that most of the damage was sort of negated. But he wasn't expecting Bakugo to come in and land a howitzer impact right at his damaged area, sending All Might flying through a building, as Deku from here would go to stand on top of All Might and just land the finishing blow, punching him in the head, at least is what it would look like to everybody, before Deku would pull back and just say, "I'll let you have this for now, number one." As from here, he would just sort of walk off, and Bakugo and Deku would cross the finish line, as the feed would have pretty much cut off, like them not wanting to see what actually happened, saying that the camera got messed up or something like that. But right after this would happen, it would be revealed that All Might would actually be in his Small Might form, and Deku only actually held back because he saw that happen. Which means that now All Might sort of has to explain what happened with his quirk and Mirio and all this stuff, and Deku finds out about All for One and All for one, or I mean, one for all and all for one, right? So Deku kind of figures out about, you know, like the main villain of the series, but regardless of that information is not really going to be mattering here. And so we're able to just straight up jump into the Force training camp, which, funny enough, is actually going to be sort of an interesting arc this time around, just due to the nature of, you know, the villains attacking, followed by the all for one situation and the Camino Ward incident, right? So what I actually want to have happen here is a combination of a couple of things. Number one, Deku's whole vibe and the things that he's going to be doing and his character moments that take place here are going to be completely replaced with like really cool aura boosting moments, right? Because from the moment that Deku arrives and finds out that they're going to be having to face monsters in the forest just to get to their training camp, Deku would have this huge grin on his face as he thinks to himself that these things not being human, he's free to go fully all out on these things and just go for killing blows, like super just like devastating attacks. And that's exactly what Deku would do, clearing it and actually staying in the forest, as everybody else would have cleared a straight path to arrive to the camp. But Deku just didn't leave until every single one of those monsters was taken out, and he would use his heightened senses to actually take care of this, alongside with this Black Panther costume which has thermal vision. So he would be able to track down each and every single one of those monsters and take them out, arriving to the camp about 3 hours later, covered in sweat and just like looking half tired, as Deku would turn towards Mandalay, or whoever it was that actually formed the monsters, and say, hey, tomorrow make sure you double the amount of monsters and make them twice as large. I'd hardly consider that training. Didn't even push me past my limits or anything. As from here, Mandalay would look at Deku and would just be like, I have been looking for a mate. As you know, she's like is like trying to like go after Deku. This is just obviously a joke, but here the other like wild the like member would actually grab her and be like, chill out. As from here, what would pretty much end up taking place is that they would just go on to eat, and the following day Deku would just destroy a bunch of mud monsters. As the day after that, Deku would actually train by taking on the wild pussycats as a group, and he would actually destroy them, which is just like absolutely insane. Using his invisibility, he would take out the girl who could actually track him first, going on to take out the other one with the monsters, and finally just destroying the buff dude by landing a blow to his side, which would actually shatter 2 of his rib cages, which just like kind of left them in a stage of like, they don't want to train with Deku anymore. So he practically just trained with a bunch of monsters that entire time, becoming much more animalistic and ruthless in his fighting style. As speaking of animalistic and ruthless, would you guys want to see a Wolverine Deku sort of thing going on? Because I really think that it would be super cool if I did like a Wolverine Deku, especially with the success of the Deadpool movie. Or would you guys rather see like an immortal Naruto or something like that? You get what I'm saying? But yeah, just let me know down below in the comments what you guys would like to see, and I will be sure to drop that as soon as possible. But yeah, obviously most of you guys are probably going to hear this with the movie version of this and not like the third part of this, but you know, I digress. Just drop down in the comments what you guys think. And also, don't forget to leave a like. If you made it to this part of the video, you better leave a like, because you know, it's going to help me out a lot, and you know, I'm kind of asking really nicely. So leave a like, or I will eat your leftovers. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. I don't make the rules, I just make the rules. But continuing forward with the training, what would pretty much end up happening is that Deku would just show off to the class that he is just that guy. And eventually the nighttime would come around when the villains would finally arrive, trying to, well, kidnap Bakugo. But they would fail miserably. And this is due to 2 factors. Number 1, this Deku is way more powerful than the one who faced off against Muscular, and would be at around that same level of strength of a high-end Nomu. Like, he is very busted. So while Muscular would be a bit of trouble just due to the nature of his muscle fibers getting in the way, Deku, without holding back, would actually be able to land like a thunderous blow on Muscular, which would leave him groggy because he like would hit him in the arm, and it would cause like vibrations to go through all of Muscular, which would really affect him. And from here, Muscular would try to land blow after blow on Deku, but Deku would turn invisible and would would go on to like pretty much put his fingers and shove them into Muscular's eye, blinding him temporarily, as Deku from here jumps up into the air, lighting his paws on fire as he would slash at Muscular's chest, leaving an X-shaped 5-finger gash on each side, with Koda watching Deku just absolutely dismantle the dude responsible for killing his parents. Deku would finally lunge at the wall as he uses the wall to jump towards Muscular, using that like double jump momentum to land a kick straight at the direction of Muscular's like stomach area, sending Muscular flying off the cliff as he'd be like, "I'll get you for that," like landing on the ground, just absolutely dealing so much damage, with Muscular practically being at like a near death state, not being able to see, not being able to soften the impact or anything. Muscular even had a couple of branches go through some of his body parts, so this dude is like bleeding out, blind. Dude, like Black Panther Deku is like ruthless, I can't even lie. So right after this, Deku would take Koda to Aizawa, and following this, he would actually run into Tokiyami, rushing back into the forest to help out his classmates, as with doing this, he would have actually ended up noticing that Tokiyami was just going crazy, not being able to control Dark Shadow, as Deku would once again, using his suit upgrade, would actually cover his hands in flames as he would rush Dark Shadow, landing vicious blow after vicious blow, calming Dark Shadow just enough, like within a percent enough for Tokiyami to actually control him, which eventually would lead to Bakugo and Todoroki, who would be encountered by the team as they would take out the guy with like the teeth. I think his name is Moonfish, so they're able to take him out, and eventually we would end up getting the moment in which Mr. Compress would kidnap Bakugo and Tokiyami. But Deku's senses instantly let him know that he was there, and Deku was just not gonna let him take him without knowing what his next move was gonna be. So Deku would act like he had no idea what was going on, and he wouldn't tell any of his classmates, but Deku would just slip away chasing after Mr. Compress, as eventually Mr. Compress would end up arriving towards the direction of where the other villains were, and Deku would actually enter the portal alongside every single other member, as Deku would say, "So, this is your little hideout?" But from here, flames from Dabi would come shooting towards the direction of Deku, as his mask, the nanotechnology, would cover his face, and Deku would just turning towards Dabi say, "That wasn't very smart." Rushing towards his direction, as the flames just would do nothing, like they would just serve to amp Deku's suit up, as he would yell out, "Bakugo, help me kill these nobodies," as Bakugo and Deku would both have these grins on their faces, as Bakugo lunges towards Kurogiri, slamming a barrage of explosions at his like area, as you know, Kurogiri was unable to teleport any of them out of there, and Deku would land a blow on Dabi, like straight up just slashing his arm, like dang near cutting it in half, like it's only connected by the bone, but a bunch of flesh would be exposed. As he would say, "Let's calm down," as you know, he would just go on to land more blows, and eventually he would turn towards Spinner, just landing a spin kick. Spinner drops to the ground, and Deku would fall on him, landing an elbow on his face, with Deku spinning on the ground, rushing towards Mr. Compress and kicking him in the face, shattering his nose and his mask, as Mr. Compress would be knocked out. And Deku would tag Bakugo's arm, as Bakugo would then let loose on Shigaraki, blasting a barrage of explosions on him, with Shigaraki not being able to do a thing about this, with Bakugo taking out the remainder members of the League of Villains, and Deku and Bakugo just standing over the rest of them, as Deku would like he just has this thing telling him that he cannot let Kurogiri live. If this dude lives, there's a chance that they could escape. So Deku would actually just end up crushing the entire thing that is Kurogiri's like real like weak spot, and like the smoke that would come out of Kurogiri would just start dissipating, with Bakugo turning towards Deku and realizing that he straight up killed that dude. Bakugo would look at him and say, "Hey, that's not what we do as heroes, is it?" With Deku saying, "Just trust me, I had a bad feeling about him." As from here, a black sludge portal would end up arriving, and none other than All For One would end up stepping out of that sludge portal, as he would slow clap at their direction, telling them that they did a phenomenal job taking out his protege and his friends. As from here, Deku's like danger senses, like his natural instincts would just be going off the charts as he instantly lunges towards the direction of All For One with all his strength, going to land his most powerful kick, but a barrier would end up being placed in front of him with All For One saying, "Calm down," and the barrier would actually shatter with All For One looking at the leg of Deku and having to pretty much use a hardening like ability on his arm, as he would harden it, but still it would send All For One flying back a bit, as All For One would think to himself that that kick probably would have like shattered his arm and rib cage if he hadn't like used that barrier and then used that hardening quirk on top of that. Like that kick was absolutely insane. He would be on high alert and instantly he would shoot tendrils at Deku, which he would easily dodge, but All For One, realizing that he's going to be having to face off against him and this kid, would actually use Bakugo to his advantage, shooting tendrils at Bakugo's direction, which Bakugo would actually be able to barely dodge out of the way as more would be shot at him, but Deku would lunge in the way, destroying them before they could actually make contact with Bakugo, as he would look to Bakugo's direction and tell him to stay out of this fight. But with Bakugo being like, "I can't do that, Deku," and Deku just turning towards him saying, "You have to, this dude will kill you, any mistake and we die here." As from here, Bakugo would sort of understand the gravity of this situation, and Deku turning towards All For One would say, "So, you're All For One, aren't you?" With All For One saying, "Looks like Toshinori told you about me." And Deku would say, "Something like that. I can't believe that I get to be the one that actually puts you out of your misery." With All For One saying, "So, you want to kill me the same way you killed him over there?" With him saying, "That's not very hero-like." And Deku saying that sometimes you gotta kill some villains in order to be a real hero. With All For One saying, "That's something even All Might wasn't able to do. What makes you think you will?" And Deku just says, "Because I'm not All Might, I'm better!" Rushing towards the direction of All For One as he instantly turns invisible, and All For One would look around trying to see if he can see Deku, but realizing that his footsteps are coming closer and closer, All For One would end up using a quirk, an airwave quirk that would shoot air towards every direction, just destroying everything, sending Deku flying back as his suit would start to be covered in purple just due to the kinetic energy that he would be storing within himself, and Deku would rush in again and again and again and again, but All For One would dang near make it impossible for Deku to close the distance and to actually go in for a full throttle punch, until All For One starts charging a bunch of quirks into one arm and says, "Come on then, let's see just how strong you are." With Deku lunging in with the strongest kick and All For One throwing this insanely powerful blow, they would practically stalemate. But right as they're pushing forward as much as they can, Bakugo shoots an AP shot at the direction of All For One, throwing him off slightly, leading to Deku kicking him and landing a more successful blow on him. As from here, Deku would be able to deal some damage to All For One, but after that happens, All For One would stop playing around, realizing that Deku is a very serious threat, would start using his more like instant kill quirks, right? Trying to land blows on Deku, which would actually work, and Deku would try to get in close enough to use his kinetic energy on All For One, but it would backfire on him as Deku would be sent flying, and Bakugo would come trying to help as well, as the tendril would pierce Bakugo's stomach, leaving him out of the fight permanently, with Deku yelling out, "Bakugo, I told you to stay out of the way!" But a tendril would actually come shooting towards Deku, piercing his shoulder, with Deku getting angry at that and grabbing the tendril as he snaps it, and from here, like a piece of pasta, dude, he literally snaps it like that, and then he would turn towards All For One as he would say, "I'm done playing around." And so Deku would just tear off the pieces of suit that are already starting to be getting destroyed, as Deku would just lunge in again and again and again, but All For One was making it so difficult. And while Deku was nicking All For One and landing some damage dealing blows, All For One was landing more blows on Deku, and it was starting to show that Deku was just a bad matchup facing off against All For One, as eventually Deku would finally be able to land a blow thanks to the fact that Bakugo would actually end up shooting one final explosion from the ground that would create a massive amount of dust to rise up. And because All For One doesn't have some quirk that allows him to like see everything around him, Deku would be able to use his abilities of training with his mom and like just these heightened senses of just knowing how to sneak up on people. Deku would do it so unbelievably fast as he would stab his arm into All For One's chest, just crushing his heart. As Deku from here would see All For One just land on the ground as he would roar out a war cry, and Deku would grab onto Bakugo's body as that entire area was decimated. And a bunch of choppers and heroes would end up arriving on the scene as Bakugo would instantly be rushed to the hospital, and Deku would as well, realizing that he had taken a lot, and I mean a lot of damage, which means that those two were actually out of the count for the provisional license exam arc because honestly, I don't want to cover it. But right after that, we would actually end up having a very, very essential part of the story play out, which is Deku's eventual meeting of the big three: Mirio, Nejire, and Tomikichi? I don't know what this dude's name is. The dude that can basically turn parts of his body into like an animal and stuff like that. And Mirio, being his usual self, wanting to teach the students from his experience and what he's learned from training with One For All and all of those things, would actually challenge the entire classroom to a fight. With Deku, cockily thinking that, he took out All For One. There's no way this kid's gonna be stronger than that. And so Deku rushes in as Mirio would actually end up countering Deku, or seemingly, but Deku's blow would straight up just go through his body, with Deku realizing that this dude, as Mirio just disappears, and next thing he knows, 2 fingers would come flying in towards Deku's face as a punch would come straight to his stomach, mind you, powered by One For All, that would send Deku flying. As Deku would land on the ground coughing out some like blood, and he would turn towards Mirio just saying, "Alright then," turning invisible to try to land a blow on Mirio, but Mirio's danger sense would alert him of Deku's presence, and he would land an elbow on the stomach of Deku as Deku would be sent flying against, but grabbing him with Black Whip, Mirio would shoot him into the air as he would come flying in once more, landing a kick straight to Deku's stomach once more. Well, not a kick once more, but like landing another blow once more to his stomach area, right? This time, Deku would straight up throw up mid-air as Mirio phases through that so it doesn't actually hit him, and Deku falls to the ground, waking up like a minute later, realizing that he just got destroyed. Like, he didn't lose, he was massacred. And Deku finally gets a feeling of what it was like to train with his mother back in the days, as he would wake up and just want to train and fight him over and over and over again until he can finally beat him. As eventually, due to this, he would end up meeting with Mirio once again, challenging him to a fight. As Mirio would say before that, "How would you like to actually intern with us?" Being like, like you can come with me and you can like see, how I fight. You can shadow me and I can teach you a thing or two. And Deku, having massive respect for Mirio after that fight, he would just be like, "Dude, I'm game. Like, I'm ready. Like, let's do it." You know what I mean? And we pretty much just end up getting this like really, really cool moments of Mirio and Deku hanging out, and they're actually like, they become tight fast. As right after this, Deku would go to meet Sir Nide, but because of the fact that Deku doesn't have One For All in this timeline, Sir Nide is like not whining about Deku, having One For All or any of those things, so he just instantly accepts him, and so they're able to just straight away go on a hero patrol, where Deku would actually slightly be informed of the fact that they're on the lookout for a villain named Overhaul, and Mirio would actually be explaining this on their walk, as eventually Deku would have a little girl bump into him and she just looks terrified. Deku, seeing the look in her eyes, would then turn towards the direction of the alleyway as Deku sees Night-Eye, or not Night-Eye, but he sees Overhaul, and Deku just like, his senses once again just start like saying like, this dude is dangerous, you know what I mean? As Deku, like turning towards the forest, has this look in his eyes, with Mirio looking towards Deku being like, "Don't do it, like we have to take out the whole operation, not just him," like just giving him this look, like being like, "We'll save her, like we will, just like not now." But Deku just could not contain himself. He will lunge towards the direction of Overhaul with like a scratch attack, as he would straight up claw at Overhaul's face, blinding him in one eye, as Overhaul would instinctively react by grabbing onto Deku's arm and just disintegrating the whole thing. But before that could actually happen and it could all disappear, Deku straight up cuts it off, and just goes in for a kick at the direction of Overhaul. But before the kick could actually land, Mirio would just be like, come on, like seriously, as he blitzes in, like going right through Deku's body and uppercutting Overhaul straight into the sky, as using Black Whip, he would tie Overhaul up and slam him into the ground in like such a cool like Spider-Man like move, with Deku just looking at Mirio being like, I had that, and Mirio just being like, did you? Look at your arm. As Deku would say, it's a flesh wound, Mirio, get over it. There was no way that I was gonna let that girl go through another day of pain, even if it cost me my life. As Mirio hearing that would realize that like, he's right, like he was willing to let a little girl go back into that horrible world of torture just so that they could like capture one more person. Like, dude, like no, that's pathetic. Like, take them all out or nothing. And Deku was willing to do what it took. So Deku loses his arm, and that means that he gets like a cybernetic one, but due to the nature of Aries' quirk, she would easily be able to restore it one day. But due to this, there is pretty much no more threat in the My Hero Academia story, and now for the following 2 years, Deku would just pretty much train at UA High, eventually going on to become a hero. But because we don't exactly know what really happens after that, it's all mostly just speculation. So instead of like in the original Deku losing his quirk and stuff like that, Deku now gets to go and become a pro hero and just be that guy, like being the #2 hero in the world, right? As let's see, who should Deku be shipped with? I really don't care. Like honestly, in this timeline, Deku's not there for all the ship stuff or any of that stuff, so I really don't care about that. And that pretty much just ends up marking the conclusion of what if Deku was the Black Panther. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video down below in the comments. Make sure to report your attendance, seeing as a bunch of comments in the help the algorithm just be like, oh, this dude's video is like really good, he has a lot of engagement. So do your boy a favor if you guys went on to enjoy this one, and check out a bunch more of my other My Hero Academia content. I have so many what ifs, and I have what if Deku was Zoom coming soon, so be on the lookout for that. Stay posted on my community tab, and with all that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, have yourselves a wonderful day. Peace.